to grow beyond a point, you need to become either a manager, technical coach, or a consultant that is selling. Either of these things require you to be able to tell your story, share your knowledge in an engaging way that people enjoy listening to. And that's why I think that is absolutely a non-negotiable thing, despite a lot of engineers really struggling with it.
From Tuple, this is Distributed, where we show how world-class engineers and their teams tackle the challenges of remote work. I'm Jack Hanna, your host. In this conversation, we chat with Ivett Ördög. Ivett is a 35-year veteran of writing software, best known for the Next Increment YouTube channel, as well as creating Lean Poker, or Lean Developer Experience. Now, this is a day-long workshop really designed to help folks experience the value of continuous delivery, which, alongside the content she creates on communication and working with legacy code, makes her a leading expert in these topics. So in today's conversation, what we cover is how to communicate more effectively as a developer and how it can help you advance in your career. We talk about when big rewrites actually make sense and how to push them through, as well as the value of continuous delivery and how to nudge your team towards better. So many folks have recommended me having Ivett on the show. It's a highly tactical episode, so I hope you enjoy it. Ivett, let's start with some context. What are you most proud of professionally?
Probably if I had to name just one thing that I'm really proud of, it has to be the workshop that I created with Lean Developer Experience, which we will talk about later. And in general, the philosophy behind it. So, and that philosophy is delivering value early and often, and really focusing on the value that the user gets from what I build. Because that's kind of why I got into this industry. It wasn't for the technology. For me, it was more about the excitement around being able to build something that helps people. That's what I live for.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into that in detail as the conversation goes on. It's I didn't know that's how you would answer what you're most proud of, so I'm excited to get into some of the details of Lean Developer Experience, formerly known as Lean Poker, just in a few minutes. Before I do, I want to set a little bit more context because when we were chatting before the show, you mentioned that for the longest time you were a devout in-person work advocate, somebody who believed that innovation could only happen while working in person. And it sounds like in recent years, you've done a complete 180 to believe that the best work happens where people are most comfortable. And for many, many people, that setting is actually a remote context or a remote setting rather than an in-person one. When did your point of view on where folks' best work can happen change?
We need to go back a bit, I think, for that to make sense. Because originally, at the beginning of my career, I learned programming very early on. My father was an engineer, so I learned it like age 8. And then when I was in high school, I already started doing like freelance work. It was the 90s. Everyone needed the websites, so I built websites. And because I was starting out as a freelancer and I was working alone, when I switched into the industry and started working with teams, it felt so much more productive. And it felt like I'm being extended by other people. So I guess part of the reason I was so hyped about being in the office and thinking that that's where innovation can really happen is because my first experience with teamwork was in an office setting. But then during COVID, when we were forced into our home offices, I noticed something very weird, which was, at first it was unusual. But what I noticed is that I personally became a lot more productive. And a lot more innovative. I had a lot more ideas. I was discussing with people in different contexts. And yes, there was a certain loss of team spirit, which I ended up making up for by organizing like team events a bit more often than previously, which I think is actually a good strategy to have kind of, even online, if you don't have everyone in the same city, you can do board gaming online and that can kind of make up for it. But the point that I want to make is that I realized that I and a bunch of other people became more productive, and we became more innovative as opposed to less. And that really made me reflect on what's happening. And what I realized was that the office is just way too distracting for me. When I'm in the office, I end up wasting a lot of time on basically networking or chit-chatting, but not the productive kind. Like, I think there is value in the water cooler, but it's not all value. You can have like good quality chit-chat and you can have bad quality chit-chat. And I feel like because there are a lot of people there and because I am very easily distracted, it just became too much of that bad kind of distraction. So yeah, I realized that I can work very effectively from home and still have that team spirit. And then that completely changed my mind on this.
Yeah, I think that's been the perspective of a lot of different people. It's certainly been my own, and I still deeply value working in person. I get a lot of energy from being surrounded by other people, working hard. That buzz, that energy, that team spirit really motivates me in a way that is harder to replicate in a remote context. But I can also relate to what you're describing in that I have a setup here where everything that I could possibly need is right here. I have nobody talking to me, distracting me from the work that I would otherwise do. And there's no opportunity for me to do that sort of unproductive networking. Why do you have a take as to why so many folks don't seem to get this?
Well, I think that there are two different reasons. And for some reason is that they genuinely feel more productive in the office. And this is something that mostly leaders experience because I was a manager for a while. And I know that it's much harder to just have a casual conversation with your reports when they are not in the office. So that doesn't mean that you can't have that casual conversation. It's just that you have to be prepared to plan for it and to kind of encourage it. So that's one side of it. It does take a bit of getting used to, and this is something that is very really much part of my personality, is that when I see a problem that I see as a problem, and I like, okay, we have the problem that with the not being in the office without something. My reaction isn't we need to go back to the office. My reaction is, how do I make up for that, right? And if you kind of start having that mindset of, yes, there are things that I lost by not being in the office. How do I make up for that? What are the strategies, patterns, habits that I can form to get that benefit back?
You mentioned that your approach to this is basically, instead of saying we lost something, how do we specifically get that thing back? We must go back to the office in order to get it. It's instead, how do we make up for that loss with gains someplace else? And so what are some of the key places where you've seen yourself and others be able to make gains while working remotely to make up for the various things that you might lose from working in person?
Yeah, so one of the things is definitely, so first of all, I don't spend an hour commuting every day.
Sure.
That hour is not just gain back in the sense that I don't spend that hour or something, but it's also an activity that takes a lot of energy. Like going through a morning rush hour every day, you're arriving in the office tired, right? You already had an experience that was stressful. So why do we put ourselves through that if we don't have to? The other thing is that you can have these truly deep focus times where the meeting is over, you can like shut it off, and then you suddenly have your own space. You suddenly have everything where you want it to be. I have a workspace that is set up very specifically for the way that I like to work. That's something that I wouldn't be able to get in an office because there I need to rely on the office environment. So these are things that definitely help. And then there is just another side that might sound like not work related, but it absolutely is. And that is that I get to live where I am productive. So for me specifically, I'm a mountain girl. I don't feel well in a city. So I get to live in a village near the Alps where I have the mountains nearby that actually recharge me. So now instead of spending months at a time waiting for that 1 week when I get to recharge, I can go and recharge every weekend. So I'm always on full charge as opposed to, just draining the battery until I have to go and have a week or two at once. And it's just not as effective as recharging regularly.
Yeah, no kidding. I think, I mean, people have talked about the great migration out of major cities. I think a lot of folks have stuck around in cities because inertia is real, and that if you always live there, it's kind of hard to leave. But I think that's a really good shout that finding a way to set up your personal environment, both literally your desk, your monitors, all of your kind of like highly tactical things, but also your home, both in its setup and its location, to allow you to do your best work and be your best self is a really great opportunity to just increase your own productivity and happiness for that matter. I want to shift gears a little bit to the science of communication, because I know that this is a topic you're particularly passionate about, and you've coached on this, you've created content on this, and I want to bring some of your point of view to the audience here. Let's start with something simple. Why do you feel like it's so important for developers to develop their communication skills in the first place?
Okay, so have you ever had that experience of seeing someone really talented in your team or in another team who seem to get absolutely no recognition, right? They do some of the hardest work. I remember I had a colleague who was an amazing infrastructure engineer, and he never got beyond like mid-level engineer status because he was terrible at communicating, right? So being able to show what you do is important because one, if you are in a smaller organization where you have kind of a direct connection with management, this isn't as important. But in a larger organization where people need to be compared between teams, for you to be able to get ahead, you don't just need to convince your immediate colleagues, you need to convince other managers so that they feel like your promotion is justifiably more important than their folks' promotion, right? So this is kind of office politics in a sense, but that's one half of it. The other half is that to grow beyond a point, you need to become either a manager or some sort of technical coach or a consultant that is selling. Either of these things require you to be able to tell your story and tell your or share your knowledge in an engaging way that people enjoy listening to. And that's why I think that it's absolutely a non-negotiable thing, despite a lot of engineers really struggling with it.
Do you think excellent communication skills are necessary in order to elevate to the senior staff, principal, engineer level?
I would say that it's really hard to get there without it. Like, I wouldn't say that it's impossible. I have certainly seen people who were lucky enough to be close enough to the right people and then like having that little bit of a break somewhere in their career and getting there without excellent communication. But it certainly helps a lot if you don't have to have that luck.
Yeah,
like it's stacking the cards in your favor.
Yeah, I completely agree. So now, if I'm a developer looking to level up my communication skills, because that's what I'm looking for, I'm hoping to be at that senior individual contributing route, or I'm looking to get into management. In either case, your point of view on this is that communication skills are going to be a key ingredient to you getting that elevation. Where should I start leveling up my communication skills?
Okay, so when I look at the clients I have, just for context, I have a program called Tech Talks Lab where people can subscribe, and for a really small fee, they can get feedback. But what I see in that group, there are basically two kinds of engineers who struggle with communication. One group is the people who are like, I'm never gonna be on stage. I don't want to. It's scary, and I don't even know how to talk. Right? That's this internal block where you need to learn how to get over that fear and that stage fright. And the other kind of people are, yes, I want to share my ideas. So I'm going to talk about something that I care about, and then you just rush into it, and you don't understand why they don't accept your abstracts. You don't understand why people don't enjoy your talk. And in that case, it's usually either of two things. Either you are not proficient enough with like stage presence, like you walk on stage and you don't seem confident, or it's not easy to understand what you're saying because you're not speaking clearly, or it's that you're not telling a good story, you're not bringing the audience with you. And like the most typical mistake with not bringing your audience with you is when you start at the beginning. Like you start at the point where you already understood half of it, and you just try to walk them through the last mile. But you actually need to meet them where they are right now, which might be much further back. And then you need to also figure out why this topic is important for them. Because if you were to say, I don't know, here's a talk about monads because I like monads, and then you give a talk on monads and the title is monads, no one is going to come. Why? Because they have no idea what are you talking about. Either they know what the monads are, and they don't care because they already know it, or they don't know, and they don't know why they should come. So that's kind of the other side of it. So basically, depending on where you are, either you need to just practice being on stage, or you need to learn about narrative structures. And I can really recommend the TED Talks book, or it's more about just gaining the confidence. And again, that's practice.
Okay, so there's these two personas, let's call them, of folks who really struggle with communication as developers. One is kind of like the stage fright crew, this is never going to be me, and really getting a lot of repetition in and practice is going to be very helpful.
And it's going to be painful at first.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it is so painful to push yourself outside your comfort zone in that way.
Yeah. But once you get out of the comfort zone and you gave like 3, 4, 5 talks, then it flips over and it becomes really enjoyable. So that's kind of what you need to keep in mind during this phase, that getting through that painful phase means that at some point you will enjoy this.
Well, how do you get those repetitions?
It's basically you need to find small groups where you are not that uncomfortable, and then just force yourself to do it. Like even if you hate it, you force yourself to do it a few times until you get the practice. The other thing is, how do you find the opportunity? And there I say everybody should start at meetup groups, like local meetup groups, or in internal events at the company. Like almost every company I've worked at had kind of a series of talks given by peers, right? Find that opportunity and give your first talks there.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And if you're fall in that second camp where you are excited, you're willing to take the plunge and actually do it, but maybe struggle with stage presence or narrative structure, what tactics or tips can you offer that group?
Yeah, so there I think one of the best things that you can do is find a kind of a support group where you have a bunch of other people who also want to level up, and then you can give each other advice. Of course, I can recommend books like the TED Talks book that I previously mentioned, or you can just follow me on LinkedIn. I sometimes post tips on that. But the best thing that you can do is actually find a group of people who are there for you, who listen to your test talks and give you feedback, honest feedback that you probably won't get at the actual event, because people are nice. They walk up to you and maybe say something nice, but they are not going to share with you the things that you could have improved. And for that, you actually need a support group. So, and that's kind of was the initial idea around Tech Talk Lab, because that's what I wanted to give people, a place where they can just try these things out and learn from each other and from me. But yeah.
Yeah, of course, and that's why we're having you on to bring some of this message to our audience. We'll link to the Tech Talk Labs as well as the Tech Talks book in the show notes, so folks can access those resources. We've talked a little bit about the ways in which you can improve your communication, particularly in this Tech Talk context, being on stage and presenting ideas here. There's another side of this, which is in your day-to-day job. And one such example where good communication might be required is when faced with the question of, should we approach a big rewrite or a big refactor? And I know that this is another topic that is near and dear to your heart. You've given talks on this before. And I think we've all probably likely worked in an environment where we knew a big rewrite was probably necessary, but we're either too afraid to push it or had the business push back when we did suggest it. And so we'll link to this talk as well, but I want to get into it a bit because I think there's also plenty of cases where pushing a big rewrite is actually a terrible idea. And so, but both for the business and possibly for you personally or your career at that company. And so how do you differentiate between necessary rewrites and career or business crushing rewrites?
Yeah. So, okay. The interesting story behind that is that for most of my career, I was working on legacy code. And I basically started out with the mindset of, no, you should never rewrite. And part of the reason is because I have seen a lot of companies fail with rewrites. One of the famous examples of course, Netscape. And yes, Microsoft had a kind of a hand in that they went bankrupt. But a large part of it was actually that Netscape decided to rewrite from scratch. And I think that the big realization for me when I realized that maybe there is a split between good rewrite and bad rewrite was when I saw other companies succeed. So instead of telling you what are the really bad ideas for rewrite, I'm going to tell you what those companies did well that were successful, because then you just have to negate and say, when it's not this case, then we shouldn't do it. So what these companies did really well is that for each of their rewrites, two things were true. One thing that was true is that the rewrite itself was adding value, either through better performance, better stability, or simply better functionality. So one example that I often bring up is this. There was an accounting software where they completely rewrote it, but they rewrote it for a different audience, for small businesses as opposed to large businesses. Because the accounting software for large businesses had so many features that it was really hard to work with it. And then they created this other one that was basically had just the basic features, but had amazing user experience. And over time, they managed to build this small product into a full-featured one that could replace their old enterprise product, but still have a good user experience. And there they actually targeted or found a new market. And interestingly, if you use VS Code, like if you compare VS Code with Visual Studio, the interesting thing is that Visual Studio was around before VS Code was developed. VS Code was a rewrite of Visual Studio, but at first it only had a couple of features that were very much targeted toward one specific audience, and that specific audience was web developers who hated Microsoft at the time. Like there was an honest hate towards Microsoft. And then Microsoft just came around and said, hey, here is TypeScript and here is VS Code because we think that you should love us. And they built something for this niche market that niche market actually loved. And is VS Code a full-featured IDE by now? Yes, but it didn't start out that way. So one of the two things that needs to be true is that we are actually delivering business value with what we do. And the other thing that needs to be true is that we do it incrementally. Like we can't have to wait several months or years before this rewrite starts making money. It needs to start making money, or it needs to start delivering value early on. And if either of those things are not true, I would advise against it, or at least like reconsider if that's the path you want to take.
Yeah, I want to highlight one of the points there because I think understanding the nuance is really important. In the case, I think most people would agree, hey, we wouldn't be proposing a new rewrite if rewriting didn't add some sort of value. But the distinction you're making in those two examples with the accounting software and VS Code is that both it wasn't that the rewrite happened and then immediately replaced the existing solution, but instead the new software existed alongside the original, but targeting a different market. So in the case of VS Code, it was, we are going to rewrite the core functionality of Visual Studio geared for this particular audience who was never really adopting Visual Studio in the first place, which is going to unlock this new market opportunity for us while we maintain Visual Studio. And then over time, we can build up VS Code to be an effective IDE for the core market that originally adopted Visual Studio in the first place. And that way you're growing the pie as you go, as opposed to simply, hey, how do we do Visual Studio for the core audience that loves Visual Studio from scratch again, where you have no opportunity to unlock this new thing. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, and to be clear, there is one thing that I want to add there, is that it's not necessary that the audience knows this distinction. So one of the rewrite projects that I was actually involved in personally was the rewrite of a backend process. It was importing data. And the target market that we were addressing there were large customers who had huge amounts of data. But when they were using the product, they didn't know that they are using a different product from the product that the small customers got, because it was completely transparent. The switch between the two was completely transparent for them. They didn't know that we are using different processes in the backend.
Yeah, that's a useful distinction as well. So let's assume you're a developer who's identified an opportunity for a rewrite that meets these criteria, one of these two criterias, or both for that matter. Like it's something that would add value in and of itself, like unlocking a new market, and you feel like you can do it incrementally, where it's not going to take several months or years in sort of a waterfall big bang approach to realize any value, but instead something that can be delivered on incrementally as you go. How do you actually tactically go about selling the necessary stakeholders that pursuing it is worth it?
Okay, so the short answer is that you don't sell it. You don't sell the refactor, you sell the value that it delivers. Depending on how technical your management is, sometimes it might be a good idea to share that you are going to do a partial rewrite, like one small step at a time. Or if they are not very technical, you might not need to even mention that. What you want to mention is what is the value that we get from it, right? And sometimes you don't even have to communicate that value, because they come to you with a project that is simply just a good excuse for you to rewrite. And you don't need to share that you are doing a rewrite, as long as you can guarantee for yourself that this is going to speed you up as opposed to slowing you down, right? But the trick is that as long as you can make sure that every sprint you are delivering value to the customer, to the business, then no one should care that in the background you are writing. And that's the key. And that some people might feel like that this is lying or lying through omission. I don't think that's the case, because you are just focusing, and this is very much communication science. You are focusing on the thing that is relevant for your audience. What is relevant for your audience is that they get the value that they paid for. What isn't relevant for your audience is how the engine looks under the hood. Like famously, Rolls-Royce actually, you cannot open the hood of a Rolls-Royce. It's just bolted down, and that's kind of the approach that you should have. Like, even though Rolls-Royce has a beautiful motor under there, they're not going to share it with you. They don't want you to see that. You shouldn't care about it, and that's kind of the attitude that you should have. Like, your management shouldn't care about what's under the hood. It's your job to care about that.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful lesson in good communication. It relates, as you said, both to the talks and to your day-to-day job, which is understanding what your audience actually cares about and then centering your message on that thing. And so in the case of a talk, that's what good narrative structure will allow you to do. It's what a good title to a talk will allow you to do, rather than having a one-word title on the technology, but instead something that explains why anybody should care about it in the first place. And in the context of a rewrite or refactor, it's actually not going to be about the rewrite or the refactor in the first place when you talk to folks about it. But instead, it will be about the incremental value that the rewrite is going to offer, that the business stakeholders or whomever you're communicating with actually cares about. And you're going to focus on the fact that you can deliver that incremental value incrementally so that they can realize some of that value quickly, which I think is nice kind of parlay into what you mentioned right at the beginning, Lean Poker, now known as Lean Developer Experience, because your tagline is basically valuable software early and often, which is essentially an advertisement for continuous delivery, which builds nicely from this theme of trying to deliver value of a rewrite, for example, incrementally. And so I'd like to carve out some time to actually talk about continuous delivery and Lean Developer Experience, as we talked about at the beginning. Before we do, folks seem to use the term continuous delivery to mean a bunch of different things. For the purpose of this conversation, could you just define, what does continuous delivery mean to you?
Yeah. So for me, the important part about continuous delivery is really just making sure that the value that we create isn't lying around for several weeks before it starts delivering that value, right? So I don't want to see a feature done and not being released for a long time. And the reason I don't want that is because I want feedback as soon as possible so that I can adjust my plan. Because one of the things that I learned fairly early on in my career is that every plan is like, they don't survive the first contact with reality. Like immediately after you try something and talk to the customer, it turns out that that plan was completely false from the start. So really, what this comes down to is just this idea of getting feedback early so that you can adjust the plan and make sure that you are delivering the right thing.
Now, this may feel obvious to you, Yvette, but if you could just put a kind of fine point on it, why is that worth it? Like, could you share an example of continuous delivery in practice where it really actually helped either the individual developers or the team, for that matter, achieve their goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me give you my first example of that. So I mentioned that I was doing freelancing in the 90s. And one of the projects that I had was kind of an early social network, something that later completely collapsed once Facebook came around. But that social network, I was building it alone. And I was young and naive, and I was basically editing the code on the server. Like it was PHP, so I could just go through SSH into the server, change the code, and then just save it. And one thing that I noticed is that a bunch of people who were using that social platform were on my ICQ. So wherever I released something, when I finished the feature and just removed the if false from the beginning of that feature, they would write to me on ICQ and either say, hey, this is cool, or tell me that, hey, something is off, like this is not working. And that immediate feedback was super valuable because I could move so fast. Like I was releasing features every few days because, and I could really target the features to what I knew was going to deliver value. And then after this period of freelancing, I ended up at a large corporation where they were releasing every 6 months. And I landed there, and for 5 months out of that 6, our C++ code base wasn't compiling. They were okay with their code base not compiling for several months. And that was completely beyond me. How do you know what you're building is something that's good? So from that point on, it was kind of my mission to convince people that there is a middle ground between the two. Like you can be responsible and not edit the code on the server like I did. But at the same time, deliver early and often and get that feedback.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it relates to the whole agile principle, not about moving as quickly as possible, but instead giving yourself the ability to steer as quickly as possible, which I know you've talked about in the past. The faster you deliver, the faster you can get feedback, which allows you to change course, double down, whatever it might be, which is really, I think, what continuous delivery is all about. If you're a developer on a team who is in that scenario, though, where maybe you deliver software every 6 months or every 3 months, or even every month for that matter, how can you help your team or your company move towards better?
Yeah, that's a really hard question, right? So here's I'm going to give you 2 ways, right? One way is that you start talking about it and kind of lead by example. Even if you can just find a small part of your project that you can break out into a service and you can start continuous delivering just that part. Or if they don't let you do that, then just build a hobby projects that you can deliver and learn how to deliver value early and often with kind of continuous delivery. So that's one way. It's really hard unless you manage to get someone in management on your side. Like, and that was my story where I basically just talked about this endlessly for a couple of months, and then came an opportunity where my manager saw that, oh, this is a project where what Ivett is talking about would be super useful, so let's try it. And then he gave me the opportunity to try it. But so that's one way. The other way is to show people in some other way, right? And that's kind of what I built Lean Developer Experience for. Previously, it was known as Lean Poker. And the point of that is I wanted to create kind of a test environment where people can try it in a day without having to experience any risk. So the way this works is that there are teams, each team gets a poker bot and they compete against each other, and the bots are playing even before you start coding. So now you can code and release it anytime. And what happens is that people very quickly realize that the way they are not going to win at this event is not by building the perfect poker bot, but by releasing early and often. And people just default to the good behavior. That's what I like about it, is that I don't have to tell people what the good behavior is and parrot it over and over. I created an environment in which people instinctively fall into the good behavior. And then what you can basically do is kind of convince people around you to let's organize an event like this, or let's go to an event like this. and then try it there, because once you tried it and once you realize the enormous difference between even that during that one day, what you gain from delivering early and often, it's really hard to just ignore that value going forward.
Do you see whole teams attending this event, or is it usually individuals who then experience that value and then have to come back and do that first thing you described, which is basically nag their manager for months and months until they're given an opportunity to apply it in practice?
So interestingly, for a while, I was trying to advertise these events for individuals, and they didn't really work out. I couldn't sell it as an individual ticket. So most of the time what happens is that someone from an organization who really feels that this organization could level up with delivering more continuously, sometimes teams that already think they do continuous delivery, or teams that are planning on moving there, or who are not even close to it but like are interested. A few people just hear about it, and then they convince their manager to, just have this team building event, kind of, because it does function as a team building event as well, and it's a lot less cringe than what HR comes up with. So that's kind of the way that it usually happens, that a couple of people just convince their manager, and then we bring that event to a company specifically.
Yeah, I imagine it's much more impactful when you at least have a handful of people on a given team who participate, because then you have some of that critical mass that's necessary to really start to instill change and have it stick around thereafter. Because I think that's one of the hardest things about change management at any size of the company, is not just having the idea to change and taking the risk of trying something new, but really sticking with it when there's all these competing forces kind of pushing you towards the status quo. And so I guess, a couple of different tactics here, but it sounds like trying continuous delivery in a safe environment, be it something like Lean Poker, Lean Developer Experience, or with a pet project, is really a nice way to both build the skill, but also the kind of the confidence and understanding that this is something that your company or team could really benefit from. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, that's basically it. And if you think about, like, this is what I really like about Emily Bache's Saman coaching, is that what she does is, or what we do with her, is we get together with the team and work together. And that's how we learn in practice while doing it, instead of just giving lectures. There's the same with Lean Poker or Lean Developer Experience, that you get together and experience it and do it. And it sticks much better than listening to a talk from amazing people like Jess Humble or Dave Farley. These are amazing speakers that I respect a lot. But at the same time, just listening to how they do it, it's very different from trying it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so easy to just listen to a talk and feel like, oh man, I'm learning so much, I'm doing the thing. But the reality is you're just listening.
J.B. Rainsberger usually says that engineers have this delusion of being able to read themselves into proficiency. But actually, you can't read yourself into proficiency. You can just practice yourself there.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to kind of sit on. Before we wrap up, what's one thing that you hope listeners take away from the conversation?
Like, know your audience and who you are talking to, and what they actually care about, and realize that sometimes what they care about is not the same thing that you care about.
I think that's a powerful message. So thank you for that. Well, Ivett, thank you again for being generous with your time and perspective. It's a pleasure chatting with you. If folks want to learn more about you or your work, where should they go?
Either ivettördög.com or probably that's the best place, because I have a bunch of things. I have Tech Talks Lab going on. It's also techtalkslab.com. But I have everything linked from ivettördög.com.
Very good. Well, I will link to that in the show notes so that folks can reference it and find you. Really appreciate you making the time.
I appreciate you inviting me. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Thanks for joining us on Distributed. If you want to learn more about what we covered in this episode, or if you want to share your own thoughts, follow @Tuple on X or visit distributed.fm.